Fly over Tel Aviv or Nicosia or almost any sun-drenched city in Greece, and you'll notice the rooftops are crowded with the same strange object. A dark panel, a slim tank, a few pipes, no wires worth mentioning, no fuel line, no moving parts at all. 9 out of 10 buildings in Israel have one. In Cyprus, the number is 93.5%, the highest on Earth. Now fly over the United States and look for the same thing. You'll find it on fewer than 1 home in 100. And here is the part that should stop you. This device was not invented in Tel Aviv or Nicosia. It was invented in Baltimore. If you're the kind of person who likes finding out that the everyday world has a hidden history running under it, stay with me, because this one was hiding in plain sight on the roof of the White House. Start with what the thing actually does, because the simplicity is the whole trick. A normal water heater is a flame or an electric coil sitting under a tank, burning gas or pulling power to make heat from scratch. A solar water heater makes none of its own. It just harvests the heat already landing on your roof for free. Cold water flows into dark tubing inside a glass-topped panel. The sun warms it through the glass, and because warm water is lighter than cold, it climbs on its own up into an insulated tank set above the panel, while the cooler water sinks back down to take its turn. There's a name for that silent rise: thermosiphoning. No pump, no electronics. The loop runs itself for as long as the sun is up. On a grey day, a small backup element tops off the tank, and that's the only moment electricity enters the story. What makes that loop worth understanding is how good it is at its one job. A flat panel turns 60 to 80% of the sunlight, hitting it into usable heat. The newer evacuated tube design pushes that past 90, even in freezing weather. Compare that to the solar electric panels people are more familiar with, the ones that make electricity, which capture only about 1/5 of the light that strikes them. At the single task of turning sunshine into hot water, this old design is 3 to 4 times better than the high-tech panel we think of as cutting edge. In the northern states, it can cover half a home's hot water across a year. In the south, 80 to 90%. I'll admit, the first time I really sat with those numbers, it bothered me that I'd never been taught any of this in school. So where did it come from? 1891, Baltimore, an inventor named Clarence Kemp. He fused 2 old ideas, a black metal tank that drinks sunlight and a glass-topped box that traps heat like a greenhouse, into the first one he could sell. He called it the Climax. It cost $25 and saved about $9 a year, and it found its real home out west, where California offered relentless sun and expensive fuel. By 1897, 1/3 of the households in Pasadena had one. By the 1920s, roughly 40% of the homes in Los Angeles heated their water with the sky. Then, in 1909, an engineer named William Bailey made the leap that still defines the machine. He split it into a slim copper collector outside and a heavily insulated tank inside, so the water heated fast and stayed hot long after dark. He named it the Day and Night, and the name was the entire pitch. A demonstration unit on a Palo Alto sidewalk reportedly ran hot enough to scald the hands of people walking past. The Day and Night drove the Climax out of business and carried the idea east. And when it reached Florida, a state with no natural gas and a building boom underway, it caught fire all over again. By 1941, more than 60,000 units were bolted to Florida roofs, and over half the households in Miami had one. This is the detail that gets me every time, because we tell ourselves solar is some fragile modern experiment, when heating your water with the sun was simply the normal American thing to do. If that surprises you the way it surprised me, that's exactly the kind of buried story this channel exists to dig up. And following along is the easiest way to keep them coming. So if the engineering was this sound, why did it collapse? Not because the machine failed, because the price of everything around it moved. In the 1920s, prospectors hit enormous reserves of oil and gas off the California coast, and gas heating got cheap. A decade later, the New Deal threw hydroelectric dams across the country and dragged the price of electricity down too. At the very same moment, the solar heater got more expensive to build. Between the late 30s and the late 50s, the price of copper tripled and labor more than quadrupled. The verdict was brutal and simple. Solar cost a lot up front, fuel had gone nearly free, and the sun-powered heater faded into obsolescence for 40 years. It came back once, when the oil shocks of the 1970s sent crude up more than 400%, the old math worked again. President Carter offered a tax credit covering up to 40% of a system and had 32 solar thermal panels installed on the West Wing roof to heat water for the staff. Nobody, he said, can embargo the sun. Installations climbed from around 10,000 a year toward 200,000. And then it died a second time. In 1985, the Reagan administration let the credit expire and cut the research funding. The next year, during routine roof repairs, the White House panels came down, and no one ever put them back. Energy was cheap again, and for the second time in a single century, the American market for solar hot water simply vanished. Here's where the rest of the world made the opposite choice. Israel had always been short of fuel, and instead of a tax break that could be repealed, it passed a law in 1980 requiring a solar water heater on every new home and never reversed it. Cyprus pushed adoption toward universal. Building millions of the things drove the cost down through sheer scale, and that is where the real punchline lives. A solar water heater in Israel today costs around $700. The identical machine in the United States costs closer to $8,000. Same device. The only difference is that one country builds them by the million, and the other builds them one custom job at a time, which is the secret hiding under the whole story. America's problem is no longer the price of fuel, it's the checkout counter. Think about how a water heater actually gets bought here. Nobody plans for it. The old tank fails, the hot water stops, and you need a replacement within hours. A standard gas or electric box fits that emergency perfectly. One plumber pulls it off a local shelf and drops it in by dinner. A solar system can't do that. It becomes a multi-day project that needs a plumber for the water, an electrician for the wiring, and a roofer for the mounts. A bottleneck the trade actually calls the double trade. In Cyprus, the systems are so standardized that one crew installs 4 in a day, about 2 hours each, and the homeowner makes the money back in under a year. The machine never lost an engineering argument. It lost a logistics one, and in the places where the logistics line up, it still quietly wins. In Hawaii, where electricity is the most expensive in the nation and the sun is constant, a solar water heater pays for itself in a little over 2 years. The 130-year-old idea works exactly as well as it ever did. What's changed is that a newer option now covers most American homes more easily. A heat pump water heater that pulls warmth out of the indoor air, needs no roof plumbing, and moves 2 to 4 times more energy than it consumes. Pair it with ordinary rooftop solar panels, and that same patch of roof can heat your water and run your refrigerator and feed the grid, instead of doing just one job. Even Israel, the country that mandated solar hot water for half a century, began recommending the switch to panels and heat pumps at the end of 2025. So the panel that started on a Baltimore roof in 1891 is finally being retired, not because it failed, but because something more flexible grew up around it. And that leaves the real question hanging over every sun-baked American rooftop, sitting empty right now. Was the solar water heater killed twice by cheap fuel and short memory? A genuinely better machine we threw away too soon? Or was it always a beautiful, dead end, and America was simply right to wait for the heat pump? Tell me which side you land on, and if you want more of these objects you've walked past 1,000 times without knowing the war that was fought over them, you know where to find me.